What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another GTD episode. My name is Cameron Selby, and we are back with another power ranking episode. Yeah, we do monthly power rankings for the NFL videos and content. I know I love doing these things, but with all the stuff we have going on in college football, DFS, all that fun stuff, there's just not enough hours in the day. There's not enough time during the week to release all these. So we do monthly recaps. So we did one all the way back in week 6. There's obviously a ton of movement when you do every 4-week increments, but we are now officially in the November. It's the playoff chase, it's the playoff race. A lot of these teams we kind of are starting to define groups of how to tier these teams. Sometimes it's really hard to separate, obviously we have four teams that slide. That doesn't mean that's a specific tier. Sometimes tiers are even bigger than that. And you can see, especially when we get into the middle to upper very good to great teams. There's a lot of jumbled mess. There's a lot to dissect. So please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. We do this stuff all the time. We've been killing it in DFS this year in terms of taking down slates, whether it's prime time, showdown, main slates, and all that fun stuff. Dusty and Emery have been killing it with their college content. Emery has some prospect videos coming out next week regarding the defensive side of the ball and risers and fallers. Dusty, obviously the weekly recap with the college football realm. And now that we are in the college football playoff ranking portion of the season, there's a lot to dissect, and especially the waning weeks of the season, a lot of if-then statements. And so really exciting stuff. Please go check those things out. And then our recaps and our previews for the first looks of the showdown and main slates that I typically do on a weekly basis. But without further ado, let's get right into some power rankings. So starting it off, and there's some teams that could have a case to be on this list as well. This bottom tier of the NFL is probably about 5 to 6 teams. But in general, these are kind of the similar names that we talked about would be here, and they still are. Tennessee, man, I've said this before, but Cam Ward is lucky that he is the least talked about number 1 pick, because he has not looked good in any way, shape, or form. They've had coach firing already in this season, and they've dropped a ton. One of the biggest negative differentials in terms of plus minus this year. Outside of keeping it close against the Chargers last week, they're not really keeping any game close. That was their only one-score loss since week 1. Everything else was either a fluky win against Arizona. Remember, that game was the crossing the ball at the plane and dropping it, then the interception that rolled into the end zone, and Tennessee ended up recovering for a touchdown. So fluky win is their only win on the entire NFL season so far through 9 games. So there's not a lot to say that they don't deserve to be the bottom team right now. The good thing is, at least, if they are leading the race to be the number 1 overall pick, that even in a bad quarterback class, that could really give a lot of ammunition. I mean, you had a situation a couple years back where Chicago landed with the number 1 pick, and at the time they had Justin Fields, didn't really want to invest in the quarterback class. Carolina was a little aggressive, traded a couple of firsts to get Bryce Young, and Chicago inherits 2 first-round picks. The very next year, they get the first overall pick, not because of their own record, but because of Carolina's record. So with Tennessee, they have the ammunition to, hey, we don't need a quarterback, or at least we're probably not going to be drafting a quarterback this year. And when we land the first or second pick, I mean, even Cleveland this past year, where they trade back a couple of spots with Jacksonville to get an additional first for the Travis Hunter deal, like those kinds of things can help really elevate and turn around a team pretty quickly, and apparently this team is a lot further away than we thought they would be. So right now they deserve to be at the bottom. Cleveland, Giants, similar teams, similar deals for very different reasons. Cleveland, it's just bad right now. Dylan Gabriel looks terrible. I don't know if Shadur is the answer either, even though the public wants you to believe that. But regardless, they just, outside of a bad weather win against Miami, they just aren't competitive really. They just lost to a Jets team that just traded away their 2 best defensive players. And even with Justin Fields only throwing for about 50 passing yards and most of it coming on 1 play, still losing the game, that's an awful, awful loss. But regardless, they weren't going to go anywhere this year anyways. But they're set up pretty well, like I mentioned previously, with the draft scenario for Tennessee. Cleveland has 2 first-round picks with Jacksonville as well this year. So a bunch of ammunition. But the problem is, from at least doing NFL content when I was off camera, Cleveland's had 2+ first rounders a lot, and they never really have elevated other than select few seasons, at least recently. And so they can't really get out of their own way. Don't really know the direction of the team. Don't know how to justify really much going on. Myles Garrett having 4+ sack games and they're still getting blown out by, 20 points. Those kinds of things are just, it's really sad. But the problem is you can't really feel bad for him because he had the trade request and honestly didn't stand his ground, took the money, and now you're stuck. And we can't really feel bad for you because of the fact that you kind of didn't stand on your ground. But regardless, we love you as a defensive player. But that's really select few bright spots. Denzel Ward's still awesome. Offensively, it's one of the worst in football. It's hard to watch. So the thing is, it's just a race to me at this point, whether or not they will be in the first overall pick discussion. They have a couple of head-to-heads in coming weeks against the Raiders and the Titans, and that's really, I think, going to come down to who wins those games and who gets the top 3 pick. That's really what most of these teams are really looking towards right now. Giants big drop. They just fired Brian Daboll. I thought that was a bad move. I don't care about the heartbreaking losses to Denver, Chicago, notably at least. You're without Malik Neighbors. It's a transition year anyway. And Jackson Dart has at least shown enough flashes that the guy that handpicked him, give him some time. And, a midseason firing I thought was a very bad move. And I don't really think that's the best way to go about things, especially for Jackson Dart's development. Like I said, he's done fine without Malik Neighbors, who tore his ACL a few weeks back. And on top of that, Cam Scadaboo broke his ankle a couple weeks also. So there's not a lot that he's working with, and at least they're competitive. They're in games for the most part. Only one true blowout loss, which was the Philly game, but they blew out Philly a couple weeks prior to that game. So it was a team that was young, and we expected that they were going to be last in this division. I thought that they would be, closer to 6-7 wins and flirt with that. Maybe if they were at full strength, that would have come into fruition. I mean, don't let Chicago come back the way they did. Don't give a historic collapse against Denver, who dropped 33 on you in the fourth quarter, and you're 4-6. And Brian Daboll still has a job, and you're probably not in the wild card race, but you're at least, hey, this was positive step. We made a step towards somewhat relevance going into 2026, but now all of a sudden that feels derailed. I don't know if the Giants are going to keep on gianting. Feels like the New York teams have been the worst 2 teams from a long-term perspective over the last 15 years since their Super Bowl in 2011. I don't really know what to make of them. New Orleans, they're competitive. You can say that. They just had a road win against the Carolina Panthers, who, were 5-4. So, very solid win. And right now they tried to give the reins to Tyler Shuck. Not look great either. And I didn't even expect him to be the answer. Honestly, second round quarterbacks no longer, to me, are even a consideration. It's as bad of a value to me drafting a quarterback in the second round as it is drafting a running back high in the first round, because we've had more of a success rate of first round hits of running backs recently in top 15, top 20 than we have quarterbacks in the second round. I know Jalen Hurts, most recent Super Bowl MVP, was a second round quarterback, but he was drafted to be a backup. He was not expected to he's going to be immediately taking out Carson Wentz, taking his job and moving forward from there. So it's tough to see the direction, but at least I think there's a path, I guess. I really want to see Kellen Moore come back another year when he isn't in cap hell. I don't think that he would have taken his job if he didn't have that certainty or guarantee. As long as they string together a couple of wins, they're also in first overall pick consideration. Having head-to-heads against Tennessee and the Jets the final 2 weeks of the season is big. You can even include Miami in that as well. So I don't know if they'll win their way out of being a top 3 pick, but for right now, they've got 2 NFC wins and a head-to-head win over the Giants for what it's worth as well. So if you're winning these head-to-heads against these teams below you, you're going to have a worse pick than you would think. Last year, we thought that they would have a bottom 5 pick up because of tiebreakers and an easy schedule, getting the 9th pick, and ended up selecting Kelvin Banks with that. So, not much else to say about that other than it was a transition year. We expected them to be one of the worst teams. They have been so far, but they've stringed together a couple wins, and they're all just jockeying for the first pick at this point. I mentioned it's probably deserved to be on that slide. Allegedly, the Raiders do as well. I know the Jets, it says that they gained 3 spots because they were the only winless team the last time we did these power rankings. They won 2 straight games, comeback win over the Bengals, then had a bye, and then a win over the Cleveland Browns. So back-to-back wins, and Aaron Glenn, I don't really know what to make of this, just because they are the team that truly blew up their at least short-term future. They traded away multiple top-end players, Quentin Williams to Dallas, Sauce Gardner to the Colts, but maybe they sold high on them. They got really high draft capital for both of those guys. They got two first rounders for Sauce Gardner. They got a first and a second in the next 2 years for Quentin Williams. And so now you've got 5 first-round picks over the next 2 years, including 3 in 2027, which is going to be such a awesome class. They have the ammunition to make things work. I know the Jets have been at the bottom for a while, like I mentioned, similarly to the Giants, but they also haven't had nearly as much draft capital and opportunities like the Raiders have had or the Browns have had, at least in recent drafts, to where they've had the misses up top, and that's probably why they are kind of capped where they are. So this was going to be a transition year. Unfortunately, even though we were rooting for Justin Fields to have another opportunity, because I think he deserved to be re-signed by Pittsburgh last year and at least keep the job from Russell Wilson going in, I think it would have been a similar to the same result last season. I think they would be in a similar position this year, but you can't be throwing for 50 passing yards in a couple of games in a four-week stretch. That's what he did against Cleveland. They did win that game. And then he did a similar thing against Denver. They lost that game overseas. So they're jockeying for first. They probably deserve to overall be on the first slide. But at the same time, there's not a lot of room, and they're back-to-back wins. So power ranking-wise, they probably deserve to be a couple spots higher, even if we don't view them overall as staying this high for the rest of the season. The Raiders, oh, I don't know. I'm sorry. They're just ugly. It's been bad. Geno Smith, that was supposed to be, hey, it's funny how we've been saying, hey, it can't get much worse than this quarterback situation. Insert somebody else, instant upgrade on paper, and it just hasn't worked out. We saw that with Aaron Rodgers last year, and then now we're seeing that with Geno Smith, who had some very formidable, serviceable years with Seattle. Everybody, even me, I wasn't nearly as much of a stand on it being an atrocious move for Seattle or anything of that nature, but everybody was simultaneous. Seattle moving on from Geno Smith, bringing in Sam Darnold for a high-end deal, risky deal. It looked like a very bad move on the surface, and now Seattle looks even better. It'll be a while until we get to them. And then the Raiders, meanwhile, Geno leading the league in picks. They're getting shut out against their division rivals. Last Thursday against Denver was one of the worst games I've seen in a long time. 10-7 loss, and then Jacksonville losing a heartbreaker in overtime. I mean, there's nothing really that you can say about this team since week 1 when they did beat the Patriots on the road, which completely would be a different result if they played tomorrow. But other than that, you've got to win against Tennessee, who is dead last in this power rankings, and that's all you have to show for this season right now. So it doesn't look good, and at least Brock Bowers is back. At least GNT is looking a little better. Like fantasy assets, that's really what I care about, at least for the rest of the season with this team. Now they have a couple of home games the next few weeks, and then they've got a pretty tough stretch November to the end of the season where you have the Chargers, Denver, Philly, Houston, Kansas City. So Dallas, Cleveland, Giants, probably your only winnable games. And so all of a sudden you're a 4-13 team, and that just ends up making this Geno thing. Hey, do we immediately move off of him? Do we immediately move off of Pete Carroll? I don't know the answer to those questions, but I'm not sure the Raiders do either. That's a tough one. Washington, big drop once again. They started out preseason, or at least prior to week 1, in the top 10. Dropped them about 9 to 10 spots, the past power rankings, and then this one, for obvious reasons, they've lost 4 straight. And it's so funny as a parallel from last year to this year, the exact opposite reaction of Washington was kind of middling last year with that Hail Mary, infamous Hail Mary game against Chicago. Middling. Chicago was actually a pretty strong start to the year for what it was worth. And then all of a sudden, after that result, Washington just shot up, and that rode the lightning bolt all the way to the NFC title game. Chicago just bottomed out. Head coaching change was a disaster the rest of the season. And now they had a similar game where Chicago won as time expired, game-winning field goal in the weather, and Washington since then have not won a game. Chicago since then have won games. They're trending in complete opposite directions of what the same result was last year, which is crazy to see. But Jaden Daniels, it's been a season from hell for him. Several injuries. Week 2, he hurt his knee, came back, left the game versus Dallas, missed the game due to a hamstring injury, then came back, and then in garbage time, that was probably going to be his last drive and play of the game. which is unfortunate because I know that Dan Quinn was probably going to pull the starters when they were getting blown out by Seattle and then dislocates his elbow in a nasty, gruesome way. And at this point, the way the season is trending, I wouldn't anticipate that he would even be back. I don't think you should risk it. That's three separate injuries that he's dealt with. And sometimes there's playoff teams that just have completely lost seasons due to injuries. They lost a bunch of bodies on the defensive side early in the season, and that really is starting to take its toll on them. Dan Quinn now took over play calling duties defensively because their defense has been so bad. So maybe that kind of makes them a little bit sneaky competitive going into the rest of the season. But, it's unfortunate after the immediate leap that they had in the first year with all of the players in that system and the first year quarterback. And then now all of a sudden you're 3-7 the following year. It's tough to see. Atlanta, I don't think that they're in the same tier as the rest of these teams, but they kind of fall here by default because they're just not getting the job done, and then they're getting shit on by bad teams. Lost 4 straight since the last video, which is crazy to see because they beat Washington right before their bye in a not necessarily a must win, but a great response after getting beat 30-0 by the Carolina Panthers. Come out of the bye and then on Monday Night Football in a primetime slot, beat the Buffalo Bills and beat them convincingly by 10 points as an over touchdown dog at home. Since then, they've gotten blown out by Miami at home. They lost a close one to Indy this past week and the Patriots. No harm, no foul in that one. But all of a sudden, they've got a bunch of losses. And they're just 3-6 and treading water. I don't know necessarily if it's possible for this division to have 2 representatives because of how strongly the other divisions are looking right now. I mean, there are 9 teams right now that are 500 or better in the NFL. There are 9 teams right now that are 500 or better in the NFC. The one team that is 500 and not with a winning record is Carolina, who, yes, they are playing this week, but they have already lost 2. So it's not like they are getting a tiebreaker or head-to-head by taking them out this week. They're on the outside looking in. I think it's going to take a lot of help for them to even make any kind of push. They are better than their record indicates, but they still were a 500 team. And it looks even worse because, remember, they traded their first round pick to the Los Angeles Rams to trade up and get James Pierce this past year. He's actually been pretty good. But at the same time, it's pretty scary because right now they would have a bottom or a top 10 pick in the draft in 2026. And that goes to the team that is playing one of its best in football. You rarely see Super Bowl contenders picking in the top 10. So it doesn't look good on the surface. Hopefully they can salvage the win, salvage their season to at least get to 500 football. I think they are capable of doing that. The schedule is truly capable because they're going to be favored in the next 3 games. And then a home game against Seattle. I know Seattle is playing lights out, but 4 weeks from now, you never know. Plus, they're at home. You just never know with the cross-country matchup like that. They could be 3-1 after the stretch, be 6-7, be around 20, and still need a lot of help to get into the NFL, or still need a lot of help to get into the playoffs. But at least it's capable. Their schedule at least is forgiving enough to where they can. But they've dropped some brutal games against Miami and Carolina. And it's not just dropping them, but getting blown out like they have been against both of those. That is really, really pressing for this team that should be right around 500, and they're not. Going on over, shout out to Miami for at least being not folding. I thought the writing was on the wall for after the Tyreek Hill injury, who was playing as bad as he was, for them to just completely derail the season, fire Mike McDaniel, and then just fold, punt, tank, whatever you want to call it. And they've been competitive. Again, I just mentioned about Atlanta shitting on them on the road 34-10. They did get handled by Baltimore, but they moved the ball a lot on Baltimore, and a lot of the loss was self-inflicted because they had the ball for a lot of that game and just several mistakes, miscues, going forward on 4th and post fade or goal. And on 4th down, going, a wheel route fade to Devon Achane against the 6'4" safety, those kinds of decisions, kind of really what made that loss appear larger than it was. But they were pretty competitive in that game. Cleveland, that weather game, also that was the furthest one away. But since then, blowout win against Atlanta, a blowout win against Buffalo when they were a 2-touchdown dog at home, and they blew them out, wasn't close from the jump. And, they're competitive. That's all I can say. And so now they come into this, playing a game in Spain against Washington, who have Marcus Mariota now. I mean, I think they're favored for that game against the the Saints still be favored in that game. And in the Jets game, it's going to be at least a pick 'em, but probably they're going to be favored in that one. So all of a sudden, 6-7 on the board. I didn't think that was even possible after the Cleveland loss. And all of a sudden, they're in this situation where they could really be in a really good spot, winning a couple division games like they did, splitting with Buffalo, I thought was huge, and then beating the Jets already. I think that they're set up to where I'm not saying that they're a playoff miracle away. I admire the effort for Miami so far. Dallas, and that look, I said with Dallas, if they were going to be any kind of playoff flirtation contender this year, they needed to be like the Steelers were last year, where the Steelers had the brutal end of the season. They had to start out like 9-3. They had to in order to have a chance. That's exactly what happened. The best case scenario, the first 12 weeks of their season, finished with a dud, and then were blown out in the playoffs, and it wasn't close. Dallas was going to be on a similar path, and they dropped games that they shouldn't have dropped. Losing to Carolina as a favorite, I know it was on the road, but you don't lose that game. Getting blown out by Denver. Denver has played a lot of bad teams close. We saw the Raiders game, we saw the Jets game, and in between that was a Dallas game where Dallas got shit on, wasn't close. And then this past week as a favorite against Jacoby Brissett at home, right before the bye, losing by 10. One of their touchdowns was even a special teams touchdown. And so after your bye, you were on the road, Monday Night Football against the Raiders. You were favored in that game. I'm probably going to pick you to win that game. But after that, once again, Philly, Kansas City, Detroit, Minnesota, Chargers. At Washington looks a little better now. Giants look a little better now. But you are going to be dogs in every single game other than the last two of the season probably, and then this week, which are all road games. And you've dropped road games this year against teams that you thought, Chicago, you didn't expect to get blown out by Chicago, especially when you were favored. Carolina, didn't expect them to lose to that game. So even if best case scenario, you win all three of those games, that's a 6-7 win pace. And that's exactly where I had them. I read them like a book, and it's unfortunate how bad they've looked defensively. They have a lot of moves to make. They did make a move at the deadline for Quentin Williams. It was pricey. I want to wait and see because all the pieces still need to unfold. They still have 2 first-round picks in this year's draft with the Packers, and that improved a little bit after back-to-back losses for them. So I want to wait and see with the long-term trajectory, but I knew this was going to be a bad year, and it's kind of been that way. They don't deserve that +1, but it's just been by default because of all the teams that have fallen further because of injuries and stuff like that. Dallas, for the most part, at least offensively, have held up. At least over the last 4 weeks, and it still hasn't been enough. So now they're hitting their grueling stretch already below 500. I just don't like what I'm seeing, and it doesn't get much better. And they're going to be 1-3 after this stretch for sure. And if they're not, I would be absolutely shocked. So going on though, Cincinnati, at least a little optimism because we went from the Jake Browning era of just no hope to trading for Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco looks like revelation. This version is allegedly even better than what he was with Cleveland when he led them in the 2023 season to the playoffs at 11-5. And this time, I don't know if it's just fantasy goodness, but they're putting up points now. So I know they dropped 2 of the last 3, and both of the last 2 were home games against the Jets and the Bears. And the Bears won. It was a miracle to overcome a miracle comeback. So I don't even know how to describe that game. If they played that game 10 times, they would probably both win 5 of those games. With the Jets, no business, to be honest, losing that game, but they put up a ton of points. Now coming out of their bye, they're going to play Pittsburgh. It would be massive if they could win that game. They did beat Pittsburgh on Thursday night back in week 7. That was Joe Flacco's second game with the team. If they can sweep Pittsburgh, I think that really sets them up because guess what? Joe Burrow opened his practice window. A lot of people weren't necessarily sure when he did say he would want to return in early December if he truly could, but it sounds like it's a legit possibility, and we'll see how soon he can return. And they're going to need him because after this Pittsburgh game, you've got the New England Patriots, who are the 1 seed in the AFC right now, and then Baltimore twice in 3 weeks, who are looking hot now that Lamar is back and healthy. And in between that, a road game against Buffalo. This next 5 weeks is rough. The following 3 weeks are cupcakes, all of them. So if you can get through this stretch 1-1 somehow, you're set up to possibly, be in the playoff race at the end. Last year, they had to run the table the rest of the season. They did so and got in. They're going to have to do the same exact thing similar this year, where all of these games, I think they're going to be dogs in most of them. They have the at least offensive firepower now with Joe Flacco to at least be in those games. Can they beat and upset any of these teams? We'll see. And then once Joe Burrow comes back, we'll see what things may fall. But even if Joe Flacco was the quarterback, 16 through weeks 16 through 18, they're probably going to win all three of those games. 9 wins is probably the target. They got to go 6-2 the rest of the way. I think it's possible. I don't think it's likely, but we'll just see what the cards unfold. That we're going to, when we do this power ranking video a couple weeks from now, in 4 weeks, we're going to know at that point, because at that point it's going to be Baltimore 3 cupcakes. Are they even in the hunt anymore? And if they're not, then they'll probably be right where they are. And if they are in the hunt, they're probably going to be much higher than this because of the way they're playing. Arizona, Kyler Murray put on IR because of the foot injury. It's a lost season. They've played teams close. They've given up a lot of losses at the very end. Arizona, one of the toughest divisions in football with San Francisco, Rams, Seahawks, the way that they're playing. And Arizona drops games that they didn't or shouldn't have. Now they are playing with Jacoby Brissett and then coming off a game where they just lobbed 38 in the first half against the Seattle Seahawks. They're essentially out of it in terms of the playoff race. And right now, I think the biggest question is, what do they do with Kyler Murray going forward? Because it's been frustrating to watch him over the last couple of seasons since he returned from the ACL injury. And I don't know if there's anything internal going on. It sounded like there kind of was prior to this season, but I don't know. This is like a long-term biggest question mark outlook of this team. Jacoby Brissett, at least as soon as he comes into the fold, apparently Trey McBride is the best tight end in football, or one of the top 3 for sure. For some reason, Kyler Murray, entire healthy season last year, can't get him a receiving touchdown until week 17. All of a sudden, Jacoby Brissett, 4 starts, 5 touchdowns. He peppers the guys that matter the most in that offense, and the offensive play calling's got to go. I don't know if it's the right coach. I don't know if it's the right quarterback. There's a bunch of I don't knows, but there's at least quality pieces that are kind of the skill players. The draft, they had a really good draft that I liked a lot. I know Walter Nolan's been banged up, but Will Johnson's been awesome. So, yeah, it's a long-term question mark for them. They're going to be competitive the rest of the season, but we'll just see how the rest of the year unfolds and if they completely bottom out, or if they make it a sneaky, frisky 500 team. Moving on, we're going to rifle through a couple of these. Carolina, I don't think they deserve as a talent to be this high, but they're 5-5, so respect where it's due. Losing to the Saints at home like they just did, bad look, bad loss, but that was coming off a stretch where they just won 4 or 5, including a road game against Green Bay, a road game against the Jets, beating Dallas as a home dog, beating Miami as a home dog. And then they're 5-5, and it's progress. The problem is Bryce Young hasn't really been a large part of why they're 5-5. Like, they're just grinding out good wins. Rico Dowdle has been a sensation. Took over the starting role and just has not looked back over Chuba Hubbard, who's a good running back. Did not see that coming whatsoever, but they've been competitive. They've been formidable. And then coming up, I don't know if they can be in the wild card race, but the schedule is there to set up. They've got Tampa Bay 2 of the final 3 weeks, but outside of that, you got New Orleans, you've got Atlanta, who you've already beaten, San Francisco, who's been banged up and kind of fallen down to earth a little bit. So there's a path. They're probably not going to get there. Probably going to be a 7-win team, but at the end of the day, at least they're winning games, and I just don't know how patient the front office is going to be. David Canales, I like the job he's done. I think he deserves at least another year. Sometimes we see, like Brian Daboll, teams move off for no freaking reason on coaches. So we'll just see. Minnesota, a lot of up and down. J.J. McCarthy missed about a month plus with a ankle sprain, and Carson Wentz, while he was in the thick of it, didn't play great, but they were in a lot of games, except for the final game against the Chargers on Thursday night, where we did take down that contest, which is fun. But from a real-life perspective, got blown out. He was ruled out for the season due to a shoulder injury. J.J. McCarthy, first game back on the road against Detroit. Oh, this isn't going to go well. They beat Detroit. I don't know if it was fluke. He didn't pay attention a ton to that game, to be honest, but it was very pleasant surprise. the way that they were able to go into Detroit and take them down like that. Then the following week against Baltimore, Baltimore is now humming, and there was turnovers. Frustrating loss, but I did expect that they would lose that game by 6 to 8 points, and that's exactly kind of the range that it fell into. And now people want to hate on JJ because he played bad. Well, it's Baltimore. They're healthy now, and Baltimore as a healthy team is a top 5-6 talent in the sport of football. So it's a tough stretch. Now you go into games where you're playing Chicago at home. You've already beaten them. That was your first start comeback effort. If you remember that in week 1. And then you got Green Bay, Seattle, Washington. I mean, the rest of the way, I think they're all NFC teams. So I don't know if Minnesota can be in the playoff race. I thought that they would be the team to take a step back and possibly finish 4th in this division. I know when we did our predictions, I think I put Green Bay 4th, but that was also before the Micah trade. It would have flipped had I known that news going prior to recording. But Minnesota, this was going to be a transition year anyways. They're going to beat teams that you wouldn't expect, as you saw with Detroit, but then they're also just going to be too inconsistent because of the young quarterback play. And just overall, it just feels like they've taken a step back this year. So they're a 500 team. Unfortunately, they're in a tough division, and we'll just see how the cards fold, because I wouldn't be shocked if they're 3-1 after this stretch or 4-0. But I'm also not shocked if they go 1-3 because of the teams that they have to face. So Chicago needs to not be swept by Minnesota. Green Bay, Seattle, back-to-back road games. Washington probably going to win that game, I would expect. But we'll know a lot after the next 4 weeks with them. But they're kind of a middle-of-the-road team this year. We'll just see what going forward. I think this is a big stretch for JJ to prove that he is the guy going forward because of how good Sam Darnold's looked and that they just moved off of him. And so hopefully for Nick's sake, friend of the show, they will turn things around. Jacksonville, frustrating. I don't know what to say. They just had a big collapse, getting outscored 26-0 in the fourth quarter by Houston. We're about to sweep them for the season. Series be 6-3, and I know the Colts are taking off, but no one expected this division to have 2 teams make the postseason, and Jacksonville had a clear path. I picked them to win the division. I think him did too, and I didn't expect the Colts to be 8-2 through 10 weeks. But I consider myself right in terms of just felt like they would be around 5-4, 6-3 going into week 10, and then there's a pretty solid stretch after that, and now they've dropped 3-4. The Rams game was very, very bad look overseas. We're down, I think it was 35-0. That was a snoozer. Comeback win in overtime against the Las Vegas Raiders, and then losing the way they did against Houston. They're a team that we expected them to compete for the division title, and then depending on who they drew in the first round, possibly be a sneaky playoff win team, but that's it. If they're a wild card team or fighting for the wild card race, it doesn't feel like they're going on the road. It doesn't feel like they can go on the road against a New England, a Buffalo, a Baltimore, a Kansas City and beat any of those teams. So I don't really know if there's any kind of long-term outlook that is positive for them, at least for this season. On top of that, they don't have a first-round pick this upcoming draft. So they're a middle-of-the-pack team, dropped the game that they probably shouldn't have, but now they have a stretch where, your 2 hardest games are at home, with the Chargers coming cross-country, which I know the Chargers typically struggle with cross-country matchups. The Colts are at home as well. And then in the middle of that, you got road games against Arizona and Tennessee. You'll probably be favored in both of those games. There's still a path for wildcard race, but that was a pretty tough loss. Very, very tough loss. One of the toughest losses, I would say, so far this season. With how they lost against Houston this past week. San Francisco, the next one up. Apologies that didn't have the record updated, just did that for this recording, at least discussing them. They were a team playing banged up, playing better than what their record was, better than what I think their talent indicated based on all the pieces that they've lost. Season-ending injuries to Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. They were banged up on the offensive side with George Kittle. Ricky Pearsall's been out a while. Juwan James was out for a little bit. CMC, the person that everybody was scared about, was the only guy that was healthy. Mac Jones has been starting throughout this entire stretch for Brock Purdy, and yet they're 6-4. I know that they just lost against the Rams. Rams got their lick back. They lost to Houston a couple weeks back, but they're still kind of in the middle of things. 6-4. We knew that their record was going to be really strong this year because they had one of the easiest scheduling breaks in recent memory with how easy it was. And then going forward, look at the next 4 weeks. They have at Arizona against Jacoby Brissett. You've got a home game on primetime against Bryce Young, and then you have Dylan Gabriel. So, I mean, they're going to be 9-4 going into their bye, and I don't know if their team deserves that, but it's an admirable effort based on all the bodies that they've lost, they've missed. Kyle Shanahan coaching his ass off, and right now they're just at the mercy of, man, Seattle Rams are just killing it so much that we're going to have to be the third team to get into this playoff race. And with how good the North looks, apparently now, because of how bad the NFC East is again, it looks like it'll be a one-team race. South will probably be the one-team race. So basically it comes down to, is the North or the West going to have 3 participants in the NFL postseason? So they can be there. They're capable of getting there. I don't know if I would pick them to win a playoff game, but the path is there because they have that easy stretch coming out the bye. They have Tennessee. So they're 10-4 going into a Monday night game against the Colts. And I don't know, that 10-4, 9-5, that's probably going to be, you're going to be in firm control of controlling your own destiny of getting into the postseason. The thing is, because of how good the other 2 teams have been in their division, I don't know if they can compete for a divisional win. They split with the Rams. They beat Seattle at least the first time. So sweeping them in the final week of the season would be big. But maybe the Rams are just too good and too far away at this point to find a way to pass up in the tiebreakers and get a home playoff game. But other than that, very admirable for their efforts. But they're also not playing anybody of particular note that they're beating strongly. Other than that Rams game, they've beaten New Orleans, they've beaten Seattle week 1. They beat Arizona barely, who dropped 4 straight. Giants, who were 1 on the bottom, they were on the first slide. So they're not beating anybody of note other than the Rams game. That was their most impressive win by far. Seattle, I know, looking back, looks better, but it was a grinded out win, and it was week 1, first game with Sam Darnold in Seattle. They're a wild card team. They're probably going to get there. I don't know if I can pick them going forward. They're a middle of the pack team, playing above their means, and you got to admire the efforts for 49er fans. I did say last time I thought the Texans would be one of the biggest risers, and they didn't rise as much as I thought they would. They did drop a frustrating game against the Denver Broncos. CJ Stroud, who has been playing much better of late, got knocked out of that game, and Davis Mills couldn't lead them to the win. The historic comeback effort to save their season. My dad, I remember, because he was at work and he texted me less stinky about seeing the score, and they just allowed a punt return touchdown. They were down 3 scores for most of the game, going into the fourth quarter down 3 scores, and then came back to win the game. Texans they're not the team that normally come back and win those games, but they did, and they really needed it because otherwise they were going to be 3-6, swept by the Jags. They haven't even played the Colts yet, and they were going to be very much on the outside looking in, being 5 games back behind the Colts and then having to play them twice. Being 4-5 makes you feel much better. I still don't know if this can be a 2-team wild card in the AFC because you've got the loaded AFC West who all have strong records. You have the AFC East who have the 1 seed, and then the Bills who were the preseason possible 1 seed. At least the one that I picked to be the 1 seed. So I don't know if this division can represent 2 teams. They're too far back to win this division. So their path is getting to that 6 or 7 seed and running the table the rest of the way. This is a pretty crucial stretch. 3 of the next 4 on the road. The 1 home game is a short week against Buffalo, which I don't think they'll be favored in that game. But if they can come out of this 500, going 6-7, you got a home game against Arizona and the Raiders, also the Colts, who one could be resting people, but also you can get your lick back against them. I don't think anybody will be shocked if Houston splits with Indy this year. And then the Chargers in between that. So the path to get to 9-8, 10-7 is there. Again, similar to Cincinnati, I don't think it's likely. I just think the path is there because their defense is so good. I just know their offensive line was so bad. That's why we were hesitant to include them in the top 10 to start the NFL season. And they've been kind of inconsistent because of that very notion. I know they had a tough stretch to start the year. They've rebounded a little bit. They've gotten 4 of the last 6, and going forward, it'll just depend on how they can will their way to victory. I expect CJ Stroud to be back this week, and even if he doesn't, they're playing Tennessee, so you should still win that game regardless. and we'll just kind of go from there. But they're right in the middle of things, and it just kind of depends on how strong they finish the season. The Bears, despite winning 6 of the last 7, I dropped them 2 spots still. Maybe that was a little bit of overreactionariness of breaking them too high early, but also, even though they've won 6 of 7, they've beaten nobody. They've beaten nobody. We've talked about every single team they've beaten so far, and we're halfway through the list of this thing. They beat the Cowboys, the Raiders, the Commanders, the Saints, the Bengals, and it took a miracle to overcome the miracle that they allowed the comeback win, and then they had to come back against the Giants. They're 6-3. I don't think anybody would pick them to beat any of these playoff teams right now. I think it's a positive step, positive progress. Caleb is still inconsistent with the little things, but he still has a rocket arm, and he's shown some killer throws in between that this year. But 6-3, and then this is the biggest stretch of the season for them, because the next 4, you've got the Vikings, who you've got to overcome because you lost to them in the week 1. Getting swept by them would be tough to overcome. Then you got Pittsburgh, who will be no walk in the park. You got a Friday night game on the road against the Philadelphia Eagles, and then the following week, a road game against the Packers. I don't know if they'll be favored against any of these teams. Minnesota right now is the worst record of the bunch, and they're dogs right now. 3-point dog this week against the Vikings. So if you can weather the storm and get to 500 in this stretch, I think that speaks massive volumes. But I would expect them to have a tough stretch, go 1-3, be 7-6, but then finishing the season strong is on the board. And maybe 10 wins is still not enough. I know Emery had multiple 10-win teams missing on his predictions for the NFC this year. That's on the board because of how many good teams there are. I mean, 6-3 and being 15th, like that just shows how strong and loaded the NFC is. So they're making progress. I still want to see them beat teams right now. Pittsburgh, I probably ranked them too low when we last saw after the bye, winning their 4th game, being 4-1, and you would have thought, man, you probably have them too low, being 14 and being 4-1. But at the same time, since then, they've lost uncompetitive games against the Chargers, Packers at home. You also lost to the Bengals with Joe Flacco, giving up like 500 yards in the process. Quality win, beating the Colts a couple weeks back. But other than that, I don't think a great win can overcome 3 losses. So I'm going to put them right where they are. They're 5-4, and they basically let Baltimore walk them down to where I didn't expect Cincinnati and Baltimore to both have a chance to win the division. I thought they would have paths to be in the wild card, and all of a sudden Baltimore is just a game out, getting to play them twice, probably being favored in both of those games, and then Cincinnati a similar ordeal, so who already have a win over them. So they're going in the wrong direction. We thought they would be flirting with a 500 team. It just took them a little bit to get there. They're 5-4 going against Cincinnati. I think that's a true pick'em game. And then following that, you've got a tough stretch against Chicago, Buffalo, Baltimore. And then finishing the season, it'll be tough as well. So, again, I think this is a 9-win, probably just because it's Mike Tomlin. He's going to get to 9-8 because he just doesn't have losing seasons. But this is a 500 team. This is kind of how I felt they would be. It's just been a lot of, hey, early strong start once again, and then tough stretch. We'll just see how it goes from here. Baltimore, big riser. Obviously, they plummeted in the rankings because of the way they got blown out. Because of the way they were getting blown out and looked without Lamar Jackson, they were just all banged up. Had their bye week, and since then have won 3 straight, and most of them in convincing fashion. They're now one of the top offenses in football once again. Lamar, still not 100%, I don't think, but him being a threat and being there is enough to where they're just going to run the table. This stretch is one of the easiest over the next 4 weeks. Getting to play Cleveland and then the Jets, home against Cincinnati. I would expect that it's still Joe Flacco, but we'll just see. And then a home game against Pittsburgh. I expect them to be 4-0 after this stretch, then be 8-5, have a firm control of first place in the division. And then all of a sudden, it's one thing to be running the table, having a strong start or strong into the season, and then making a wild card push as a wild card team. But when you've got the home game, that's another story. I know you're probably going to have to go on the road, but maybe now, instead of going on the road against Buffalo or Kansas City, because of Kansas City being 5-4, Buffalo not leading the division after 10 weeks, now you get to possibly go on the road to Indy or on the road against the Patriots. I don't think anybody's shocked if they win those games. So there's still a path there, even though they had a really tough start. I think they're very dangerous. They're very heavily favored, I think, at this point to win the division. If you don't have to do, which they're still capable of beating the Kansas City and the Buffalo teams, but for whatever reason they haven't overcome those hurdles. I don't think as nearly as much of a hurdle or roadblock going against New England the first time in the postseason, Indy first time in the postseason. Even if they're on the road, I still feel like those are good environments for them to find a path to get to the AFC Championship game. So they're right there. They're probably going to be even higher up. Didn't want to bring them too high. They still have to earn their way into the top 10, but they're probably going to be there in a month when we do this video. Packers, big drop. Inexcusable loss against Carolina 2 weeks ago. You have no business losing at home against Carolina the way you did. And then an ugly, ugly football game against the Philadelphia Eagles. I know it wasn't a blowout or anything of that nature, but back-to-back home losses against NFC teams. And all of a sudden you're 5-3-1, third place in your division. We thought you were going to be in firm control because you did beat Detroit, one of the top teams in football through 4 weeks. But you've got frustrating losses against Carolina and Cleveland. You're not blowing out Cincinnati in Joe Flacco's first start. You're not blowing out Arizona. Pittsburgh on the road, I guess, was a good win. But then the next couple weeks aren't really going to teach us anything. Giants and Vikings, I don't think nothing is going to prove one way or the other. What's going to prove it is going on the road against Detroit on Thanksgiving and taking them down. What's going to prove it is sweeping Chicago 2 out of 3 weeks. Going on the road to Denver. Tough stretches, but winnable games. That's really what's going to decide things for me on this team. This was everybody's dark horse contender, especially once Micah was traded there. But now I just feel like they're a very good team, and I don't really know if I can trust them. Offense looks a little inconsistent, and I know they're force-feeding Josh Jacobs the ball. He still hasn't had a 100-yard game yet this year. He's been just kind of a volume king, less than 4 yards a carry. And their pass catching group is banged up. Everybody's kind of dealing with injuries. Golden missed this last game. We still haven't seen Jaden Reed since week 2 when he broke his collarbone. Dontavian Wicks has been in and out of the lineup. You've got Romeo Doubs, who has been having a really solid season, just leave the game due to injury. And then Tucker Kraft, torn ACL. He was having a breakout year as well. So I don't know if I can trust this team offensively enough. And they've had stretches of giving up a lot of yards and points against subpar offenses, or Dallas getting 40 dropped on them in that tie. So they're going to be a playoff team. I just don't know how much I can trust them as a contender as much as others were viewing them as once that trade took place. Denver, I get it if you want to hate on this 8-2. On the surface, there's no reason that an 8-2 team shouldn't be in the top 10. I don't trust Bo Nix. Point blank period. That is the biggest thing. Every single team in the top 10 right now, I would pick them to win a head-to-head game. And they win 2 or 3 of those games, maybe. But once again, you've beaten nobody. Outside of a comeback effort against Philly, Houston is your best win, which Houston's a below 500 team right now. You had an awful showing against the Las Vegas Raiders. It took a historical comeback effort against the Giants at home. You had to beat the Jets 13-11. You beat Jake Browning. You beat Cam Ward in his first start. You haven't beaten anybody. And you're 8-2. Kudos to you for doing that. You're leading the division. But at the same time, you still have to play the Chargers. You're playing the Kansas City Chiefs at home this week. You're a 4-point dog. That says a lot. A 5-4 team on the road is a 4-point favorite against you at home. They've dominated you before. You have not gotten over the Kansas City hurdle. I don't expect you to this week. I expect you to get swept by them. I don't know if you can get your look back against the Chargers, but I just don't trust them. And they can go into the playoffs. And even if they're a 12-win home playoff team, I don't know if I would pick them on the road against anybody at this point, especially with the Colts looking as well as they were. Usually with by default, the AFC South champion winner, that 5 seed is probably the best wildcard team to have a chance to upset. Now that doesn't even look like a thing. So I don't trust them at all going forward. Kudos to them for winning 7 straight, but it has not impressed me whatsoever. And I feel like it's a very manufactured record based on the lack of competition they've had to beat. And then they've also lost to the Chargers, who are at 10. Chargers are hanging on. They've lost both tackles for the season. It's very unfortunate because I thought that they would be a dark horse to be a Final Four team. And Justin Herbert has rebounded playing better. But both tackles going down for the season, I think that severely caps the outlook of this team the rest of the year. They'll still be a playoff team. They'll still be right in the thick of things unless they kind of the bottom falls out. But I've been impressed with them. The Pittsburgh game, everybody was picking Pittsburgh as a not a road favorite, but a road team to go into that. A lot of times when they're playing, because the lack of a fan base, a lot of teams come into their stadium and you hear the sounds and cheers of the road team more than you do the Chargers at times. But going into their bye, I know they got a road cross country game against the Jags. But you're 7-4, 8-3 going into your bye. I think that's really strong. Coming out of that, you get to play the Raiders, and then you got a tough stretch against Philly, Kansas City, and you got one more against Denver. But this is a round 10, 11 win team, I would say, and upside of even more than that. And depending on what they do, because they already have a win against the Chiefs, depending on what happens, they could. I think that they're more likely. If Kansas City is not going to win this division, I think they're more likely to win the division than Denver is. I would say that. And if they're doing that, and then they're a 3 or 4 seed, getting to play a home game going into that, we'll just see what happens. But I think it's just one of those unfortunate things. I don't think we have the ceiling of this team because of the injuries, the significant injuries that took place with Rashawn Slater to start the year, and then Joe Alt after he came back from injury, getting hurt again and now being done for the year. Tampa Bay, they were my number one after the first 6 weeks of the season, and they've kind of fallen to grace a little bit. But also, a lot of it had to do with just the wide receiver injury issues have really taken its toll. I would say Baker's kind of cooled off a little bit, and Mike Evans being out indefinitely. Chris Godwin has not practiced in a month, and Emeka Egbuka, who was limited with the hammy, that bye, he really needed it. He came back and had 100 yards against New England. Nobody is shaming them for losing to New England by 5. Like, that's not a thing. Detroit, they lost by 15. Everybody's had a bad loss this year, and I don't think that's harming Philly as well. They don't have a gross. I don't trust that win or anything of that nature. Not as much, I would say. I at least trust Baker more than I do with Bo Nix if you're going to compare and contrast schedules. But I think they've just kind of fallen down a little bit. I know they were playing on a pedestal. They had a great first month and a half, and now dropped to a 3. And now coming out of that, you get to play Buffalo on the road, the Rams on the road, before a pretty easy stretch to end the season. I mean, a very, very easy stretch. You've got Arizona, New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, Miami, Carolina. There's not a single team after Buffalo and the Rams where you play a team with a There's not a single game in the final 6 that you're playing a team with a winning record as of right now. So if you split Buffalo and the Rams, there's a legit path to the 1 seed. There's a legitimate path to the 1 seed, and then all of a sudden they could be right back in the top 5, be a dark horse for a Super Bowl appearance. We'll just see what happens with them. I'm very curious to see how they show up against Buffalo and the Rams. You don't want to lose 3 in a row. I'm not saying this team is not capable of losing any of those final 6 games. Maybe they do. But that's still a 12, 13 win possibility for them on the board. And so with that said, I like their chances of making some noise in the postseason. I just would like to see some health come into play with Chris Godwin at least contributing in some way, shape, or form. And then we'll see if Mike Evans returns. Probably won't for the fantasy stretch of the season, but at least into the postseason, I think he'll get back in there, at least contribute in some way with Emeka Egbuka as well. Top 8, we're going to raffle through these. You got Philly, frustrating 7-2. They had an ugly win against Green Bay, quality win being on the road, but I don't know what to make of them. I still, even though they're 7-2, they are running away with this division with Dallas being in second place at 3-5. So you've got a 4-game essentially buffer because you've already beaten Dallas in the division. And I think that this is the making of a situation where a team can kind of coast, because you know that there's only going to be one team in this division to make it to the postseason. And I think this is a stretch where you can possibly see them losing games they probably shouldn't. And that's going to go a long way in determining how they go in this season, because they do have some solid tiebreaker wins against the Rams and the Bucks and the Packers now. But now you've got to play Detroit. You've got Chicago on the board. You've got the Chargers, Commanders twice. Maybe Jaden Daniels will be back at that point. Maybe not. And then Buffalo as well. I don't know what it's going to take to get to the 1 seed, but I think that this is a path. This is a similar path to what was in 2023 of just they didn't have to do a lot to just locked themselves into the postseason, and then all of a sudden their wheels fell off. Ended up being a wild card team because there was another team, Dallas, at the time that won the division, forced them to be on the road. But now you know that you're going to be a home game in the playoffs. There's a lot of 7-2 teams near you, and I find it interesting to see where they finish the season because I think the path is there for them to drive games they probably shouldn't. I don't think they should have dropped the Denver game. They definitely shouldn't have been blown out by the Giants on primetime football. So they have a very marquee game against the very team that's right above them right now. It's going to basically be a pick 'em, I would anticipate, by kickoff. Very exciting game. And then, yeah, we'll just see what happens with them. Detroit, kind of a fluky loss against Minnesota, but other than that, blowout win against Tampa Bay was pretty solid. Took care of business against Washington on the road this past week. And then Kansas City losing to them, who's one spot ahead of them, and Kansas City losing one spot ahead of Buffalo, like those kinds of things. These teams are, I think, the true contenders of, if I were to say which slide has the Super Bowl winner, I think this is the leading candidate of the slides, even though there are 4 teams that are playing better than these guys right now. I think there's a little bit of coasting with a lot of these situations and fluky losses, whatever you want to call it. And Detroit, they're going to be right there in the thick of things. But the thing is, Green Bay and Chicago, also 3 loss teams. So they can't take their foot off the gas, similar to what I said about Philly, where they just have such a buffer that they can afford some bad losses. Detroit, at this point, you've already gotten your bad loss against Minnesota at home. You've already lost to Green Bay. So you got 2 division losses already. So you're right now 1-2 in the division. You can't finish this season on a dud because at that point you are a road playoff team and have to road your way into a postseason run. And that's just a lot tougher of a path. And Detroit is one of the scariest teams on a weekly basis. I just want to see them put together a good stretch of wins. They're going to have a great stretch. If they can get out of this Philly game with a win somehow on Sunday Night Football, they've got a home game against the Giants and then back-to-back Thursday home games on Thanksgiving against Green Bay and then Dallas the week after. I could see them being 10-3 after these 4-week stretch and then being one of the leading candidates for the 1 seed, having the head-to-head win against Tampa Bay. And so we'll just see what happens. They're really good once again, and we expected that. I thought that they would take a little bit of a step back. I think they have in spurts, but still they've been much better offensively than anticipated they would. I thought there would be more consistencies and struggles from that point. And this is basically a carbon copy of how last season was, give or take another loss or 2 at this point in the season. Chiefs, we put them high as a 3-loss team to start the season, but we knew how good they looked coming out of that. The big win against Detroit on Sunday Night Football. And then recently, the Buffalo loss on the road. They don't beat Buffalo in the post or in the regular season. I think Josh Allen is now 5-0 against the Chiefs in the regular season. But right now they look great against the Raiders, Commanders. That's not quality wins, but the way they did it about just this is like their B+ game. They didn't even play their best football and are still blowing these teams out. So coming out of the bye, they're road favorites, like I said earlier, against Denver, and they're going to go on a run. They're going to be 11-12 win, or 12 might be a stretch, but 11, I would say, feel comfortable about 11-win team. And with that said, if they're 11 wins, I don't know if that puts them at this point as a division champ because they have already lost to the Chargers. Chargers have a good path of running the table, I think, in that division. I think Denver is third in that realm. But the thing is, because of even though everybody's picking them to win the division, they're just like, oh, Kansas City's just going to be there. They still got to earn it. They're 2.5 full games behind Denver right now, and then Chargers, they already have a head-to-head loss plus they're a game and a half out from them. So they have to earn their way into being a division winner if they want to keep that streak alive. If they're not, they're still capable and dangerous enough to be a road contender. But if we're being honest, if somebody's going to take down Kansas City, it's a lot easier to do Kansas City when you're at home than when you're on the road. So they're going to be there, and I don't think really any of this next 4 games are really going to tell us one way or the other. I expect them to be a minimum 3-1 or 4-0, depending on what Denver and Indianapolis brings to the table. And then from there, they're 9-4, 8-5 going into the final stretch, getting 3 division games to end the season, and Tennessee in between that. I think they're set themselves up to be in a good spot, but it just depends on how strongly hit their divisional foes finish the season and where that plays out in terms of the playoff race. Buffalo, they're playing with their food too much. they're too talented to be playing like they have been. Getting blown out by the Falcons, blown out by the Dolphins, one of the weirdest losses of the season this past week. But right before that, you beat Kansas City. So all of a sudden, this is a team that is kind of playing down to their competition. They're not really blowing anybody out outside of Carolina. And they're playing like Philly, like people would anticipate them playing with a buffer of like 4-game division win or 4-game division lead. But the Patriots are leading this division, and they have the head-to-head win because they beat them in Buffalo. So you're a game and a half out of first place in your division. We picked you to be the 1 seed or their AFC representative this season. I still think they can get there, but I didn't expect them to have to earn their way in at this point in the season. I thought they'd be comfortably game and a half, 2-game plus lead, but all of a sudden now it's the exact opposite. So similar to what Kansas City is, we know they're going to finish strong, but they don't have the path to just win out or win their way into, by default, a 1 or 2 seed. Now, Indianapolis is much better than we thought. A bunch of AFC West teams are in the fold. New England's awesome at 8-2 right now. So you got to earn it now. And I didn't expect you had to. Maybe that's a good thing in general because they were kind of coasting and being complacent throughout the first half of the season. They're playing Miami. They're playing the Saints. They're playing the Carolina Panthers. Like, you're winning those games and it doesn't really matter. But getting blown out against Miami this past week, I didn't like. Atlanta didn't beat before they lose 4 straight. That doesn't feel like helpful, but it honestly doesn't matter in terms of tiebreakers or anything. You're coming into the stretch where you're going to be favored against every team the rest of the season. Maybe Philly in week 17, big game in terms of just fun. Maybe that's a pick 'em. But other than that, you're going to be favored against Tampa. You're going to be favored against Houston, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, New England. I would anticipate Vegas would say that Buffalo gets their lick back to split the series. But if not, then I wouldn't be shocked. That would be the only game that you would be a dog the rest of the season. So 13 wins is still on the board. And you can get there, but now you got to earn it because you've already dropped a couple games you probably shouldn't have based on your count. And then lastly, Seattle, Indy, Patriots, Rams. I don't know if any of these teams can win a Super Bowl this year, but they are the 4, I think, clear-cut playing the best football over the last month. Seattle has destroyed teams recently, and some of them are bad teams. I get it, but they also have some quality wins as well. Going on the road against Jacksonville, beating Houston on Monday night, the shootout against Tampa Bay loss, like very forgiving. They have the most 2 forgiving losses to me. Losing at home in a shootout last second against Tampa, and then way back when week 1 against San Francisco. I know they were both at home. Home game doesn't necessarily matter in terms of tiebreakers and stuff, but beating Pittsburgh on the road at the time, great win. And since then, they're taking care of business in big ways, blowing out Washington, blowing out Arizona. Maybe this is lightning in the bottle. Maybe this is Sam Darnold last year with the Vikings 2.0, with they're just an awesome regular season team, and then they're just going to have a tough loss later on. But that's not now. This is now. They're playing great. Really strong stretch. Very big marquee game this week against the Rams, who are number 1 in this ranking. Yeah, I like the way all these teams are playing. The Colts. Jonathan Taylor is having a sneaky, historical, great season. Nobody since 2007, Randy Moss's touchdown, record-breaking receiving touchdown year during their undefeated stretch. Nobody's had more than 21 touchdowns. He's got 17 in 10 games. 17 in 10 games. He's on a 2,000-yard pace, 17 touchdowns already. They're 8-2 going into their bye week. I had a friend in our group chat for our fantasy league say, like, who's having the better season, JSN or JT? Yeah, JSN's doing awesome. First player to 1,000 yards receiving, doing great. He's got 5 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor is the reason they're 8-2. He is absolutely on a killing stretch. He's doing better than what Saquon Barkley was doing last year. And people were saying Saquon Barkley, like arguably season after season, they sat him to not break the rushing record. So he flirted with the rushing record. And I still say Jonathan Taylor's having a better year than he was last year. That's how good he is right now. So, and on top of that, Saquon got to play with A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert for stretches, and having the best offensive line in football. It's just JT. I know the receiving core is pretty solid and deep, but it's not like Michael Pittman Jr. is any household name. Alec Pierce having a great year, not a household name. Tyler Warren, awesome rookie season. It's still just JT, and he is freaking killing it. So that's why he is the picture on this specific side. He is having a historically great pace. He is on pace for over 2,000 yards. 8.9 touchdowns would be the second most all time No one other than LT has had more than 28 touchdowns. Basically, there was a stretch early 2000s where Priest Holmes broke the record, and then Sean Alexander broke the record, and then LT did it the year after that. Well, no one has even come close since. The most touchdowns in a season by a running back since then was 21. That's been by a couple guys, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey. He's on pace for 29. 29 touchdowns. I pray that he stays healthy. I hope that he has that stretch where he can finish the year strong and flirt with some of those records because he's absolutely killing it. He would be my MVP if I had a vote because there's no player that's been more valuable. I mean, that arguably, because it's going to be a quarterback award. He won't win it. I know he's not the favorite, but that's how good of a season he's having. Drake May, absolute revelation right now. New England has two of the best wins in the entire NFL this season. They went on the road, on prime time, beat Buffalo the way they did. I don't think I can say much more about that. And then Tampa Bay, a lot of people were picking them to lose that game, even though it was a tough, 2.5 point spread. But beating them on the road, the way they did as well, and all of a sudden now they're 8-2, and now they control their destiny going into the postseason. We knew that the Patriots would be a playoff team. This was everybody's pick. They weren't a dark horse to make the playoffs. This was everybody's worst to first. Like, if there's going to be one, it could be them. And on top of that, this was everybody's 6 or 7 seed. So it's not a surprise that they're a playoff contender. It's a surprise that they're the 1 seed through 10 games in the first season with Mike Vrabel, with Drake May in his second year. Stephon Diggs has been awesome in terms of a presence, and their defense is just stopping and being lights out. They are on a 7-game win streak, quality wins. There's nothing on the schedule that is just like, don't like that. Home loss against Pittsburgh, way back when. Week 1, home loss against the Raiders. Week 1 is basically a preseason game at this point in time because nobody plays their starters, and it was a frustrating loss. It was week 1. If they played again today, the Patriots would win by 2 to 3 touchdowns. Like, that is how big of a gap it's been since that point in time. And on top of that, now you've got a home game against both New York teams, and then Joe Flacco on the road before their bye. At least winning 2 of those games, possibly all 3 of them. You're going to be 11-2 going to the bye, and then after the bye, you get to play Buffalo, who you've already beaten once at home. And if you win that game, all you've got left is Baltimore, the Jets, the Dolphins. This is a 1 seed out of nowhere, and it's been fun to see. The only path of them having any kind of playoff run is for them to do something like that, being the 1 or 2 seed, running the table to set themselves up to where people have to go to Foxborough to knock them off. And I would still possibly anticipate somebody would. Maybe it is a year early for them to truly be a Super Bowl contender, but it's been lights out impressive, and nobody saw this coming. And then the Rams, they to me are the top to bottom best team in football right now. Quality wins everywhere. Beat Indy before losing to Pittsburgh. That was their only loss through 8 weeks. And then they've just taken care of business. The only losses they've had, overtime loss against San Francisco. They got their lick back on the road, blowing them out, dropping 42 on their division rivals. They blew out Jacksonville. They blew out the Saints. They blew out the Baltimore Ravens. They basically averaged beating somebody by 22 points over the last month of the season. That is why they are number 1. And on top of that, Stafford, first quarterback, I think, in NFL history to have at least 4 passing touchdowns, 0 picks in 3 straight games. I can't say enough about that 37-year-old quarterback and how great he's playing, especially when we saw him coming into this season with an injury. Yeah, I can't say much about him. He's been incredible, and it's been fun to watch. And I think they're the true team to beat in the NFC. But we'll just see because they still have to prove it. This next stretch, you got Seattle, Tampa Bay. Like, those are marquee games at home that you get to determine tiebreakers and if you are 1 seed viable. And I think that'll go a long way. But with that said, that's all I got for you guys. We appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have this far, let us know what you think. Who have you been really impressed with? Who have you been really impressed with? Who you've been disappointed by? A lot of movement in this ranking, especially since we do it once a month. But it's always fun to break those down, do a recap of the situation in the realm of the NFL. Let us know what you think. Who's tied too high, too low? Tell us who your dark horse is. Who's your Super Bowl pick right now? I want to hear all the comments on all that. Check out our college football content, DFS content coming out later this week. We're going to be doing this Sunday live streams, all that fun stuff. We're in November. It's perfect football weather. I love it, and I hope you guys too. And until then, I will see you on the next one.